The problem is that the government does not know how to spend money on educating your children in our future. Schools like the Charter School of Wilmington and Tall Oaks are based on a free market structure, and they hire and fire teachers based on skill and results, not tenure. People leave the school when they don't receive the product that they were expecting and paying for in comparison with their other options. Nationally, public schools are spending nearly twice the money per student than the private schools, but their scores are still worse. In 1991, the Public Purpose estimated that public schools spent nearly 43% more per student than private schools in America, but their scores were almost 25% lower in math and reading. The public school system has become inefficient. In the statistics above, we see that there is no correlation between how much money is being spent on a program and the successful outcome of the program. Academia needs to be unchained from the bonds of bureaucracy and instead find freedom in the benefits of the free market economy. Finally, and very much as a result of my first 2 points, we have a lack of community investment in our education system. Nobody is watching as money goes directly from their paycheck to the education of their child. There's a large vat of tax money that is spent on education, but there's no sense of connection beyond that. Our Lord Jesus Christ spoke to this when he said, quote, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also," end quote. This principle applies to more than just valuing the things of earth to things of heaven, but it also is demonstrable in where our passion lies here on earth. When we bring education back to a communal entity instead of a public vat, we will see that the rewards will be much more fulfilling, and we will be able to watch as the breath of interest is slowly breathed into the dead corpse of societal complacency. Aristotle spoke to this when he spoke of the tragedy of the commons. He said, quote, "Property should be in a certain sense common, but as a general rule, private. For when everyone has a distinct interest, men will not complain of one another, and they will make more progress because everyone will be attending to his own business," end quote. Given that education is too accessible, inefficient, and has a lack of communal investment, what should we do to fix it? What will make education more valuable without abandoning those who truly need the help of the government to educate their children? Well, let's work back to see where our country is doing well in education and see how that can apply to the primary and secondary education system in America. Internationally, America lays claim to all but 4 of the 15 highest-ranked colleges, according to topuniversities.com. While UNICEF says our international scores in primary and secondary education don't get a glimpse of the top 15 of industrialized nations. So what are we doing right in higher education that needs to be done in primary and secondary education? As best as I can sum it up, the U.S. government is giving the money to qualified people pursuing higher education and saying, "Here, you need the help, and you have an educational desire. Go find a school that best suits you and succeed there." And this model, called the FAFSA model, has worked for years. People have been able to have large portions of their education paid for because of grants from the public and private sector. The U.S. government should cut their costs, and instead of spending billions every year on keeping large school buildings open and hiring expensive, ineffective teachers, they should close down a large majority of the public schools and instead give every qualifying family a stipend in order to defray the cost of private school. For example, if the government was to give every family with a high school student $8,000 a year, each family could find a school that best suits their child's needs and invest in the community there. If there were more educational expenses to be paid, the student could turn to the private sector for merit-based scholarships, or the balance would simply be paid by his family. I would not advise for the government to just simply hand out money to anyone with school-aged children, but to provide some sort of accountability in this process. The money would come with strings attached for the parents and students, but not the schools themselves. This would ensure that the voucher is actually being used on the education of the child, and that the child was not being neglected while the parents spent the money as additional income. The family would be responsible to report the spending of the money by providing the government with information such as the tuition at the child's school, uniform prices, transportation, books, supplies, etc. By having this method of funding, we would save millions of dollars in tax money, encourage businesses and families to be involved, and embrace and celebrate the gift that education is for the children of America. Now we will discuss some of the arguments against my proposition for educational reform. One of the main sources of opposition to my argument for educational vouchers are the public school teacher unions, especially the National Education Association. The NEA has been lobbying against vouchers because they believe it would erode educational standards, reduce funding, and cost public school teachers their jobs. These arguments are unfounded on many levels. Great economic thinkers such as Friedman, Sowell, and Williams have endorsed school vouchers because they subsidize the consumers rather than the producers of education. In other words, we would not be giving money to the schools to change their programs or hire new teachers, because this has failed us for decades. Instead, we would be giving the educational customers, that is, the students and parents, the opportunity to send their children to a broader catalog of schools. This changes the education industry from being an 87% socialist system to a competitive, free market industry which would cause these competing schools to increase their standards in order to improve their output and in turn attract more students. This would only cost teachers their jobs if they were inept to do their job. In fact, this new free market model would improve the pay and position of many of the great teachers in this country. They would be able to earn a competitive salary based on where they taught, instead of having a tenure based on how many years they have been teaching. Opponents of the voucher system have also argued that the cost of tuition would rise along with the demand. The cost of an educational voucher system would be lower than the current price of education for a lot of people. Millions of families with their kids in a private or homeschool situation would find themselves free of the burden of paying double for education. Another fear in moving forward with the voucher system is that private schools would jack up their prices so that they could ultimately increase their profits and that millions of children would be unable to receive an education. However, simple economic principles of supply and demand tell us that if the education market becomes flooded with prospective students, that many schools will be competing for them, and we might even see the cost of tuition deflate in the long run. Another argument made by the opponents of the voucher system is that it would stifle the religious freedom that we find in private education. In reality, the opposite is true. Statistics show that 90% of the people that send their children to a private or homeschool do so for religious reasons. If we were to put the majority of the students in our country in the private schools, the religious freedom of the students would increase. This could also provide a societal push for public prayer at schools and in courts and in the public eye as a whole. Quote, "I can only say that I view it, education, as the most important subject which we as a people can be engaged in." End quote. Our great President Abraham Lincoln was certainly correct in his evaluation of the great need of education. We are at a place in history where our education system as a nation and as a global community as a whole needs to shape up or ship out. Our current style of education has become too accessible, inefficient, and has a lack of vital community-building ties. And unless we change this about our education system, we will not see success in America's elementary and secondary school systems. We need to turn to a voucher system, where the government can fulfill its role in assisting the public and not in crippling us. It would save the government money, provide free market competition, improve international test scores, but most importantly, it would show our society that education is a gift, a blessing, and an opportunity. It would show our government that education is to be done with excellence, and it would show the world that America, the land of opportunity, is also a place where one can receive an excellent education and where one is instilled with a passion for learning. Let's think back to my opening story. Imagine if that great wave of people being ushered into that school building had a desire to learn. Imagine if they had both the desire and ability to be educated and to understand and know God's creation in a better, fuller way. We can achieve this if we change the education program. If we let go of our burdensome crutch of government-run education, we'll be able to find freedom and success in the free market style of education. And when we put the initiative of education into the hands of students and parents, we will watch America catch hold of a spark of educational interest that will no doubt be slowly fanned into a